Towson is the original Maryland State Teachers College. So they have like a very long history of quality teaching program. And I mean, I'm biased because I went there, but I think it's awesome. Like it prepared me so well for my job. And I loved it. A lot of our professors were teachers that were practicing. So we were like getting really good front line. This is what's going on in education right this second experience from people who were doing it. And I loved that. And when we started, we were in a cohort, like small, 15 people, but we were in schools right away. Like starting the first time that we went, we were in Baltimore City schools. So we got to do a semester there, and we got to learn about the ins and outs of urban education and what that looks like. Because a lot of us, I wasn't familiar with that. And so we got to experience that, and we were teaching lessons. And then we moved to Baltimore County, which is very diverse. Like you can go from one side that is almost like rural area to, if you ever listen to the Serial podcast, that's in Baltimore County. So that's the other side, like there was such diversity. It was awesome. So we got to bounce around there and try different things. And then we went to our like student teaching experience was a whole year. And so you went to work in a county, and you had two different, like I taught in 5th and 2nd grade for a year. And so we got like a very wide range of experiences. We got to be like involved right away. It was great. It was really just the best preparation program.
Are you certified K through 5, K through 8? I don't know. Different programs like break it down differently.
Yeah. So when I graduated, I was 1 through 8.
Okay.
But then when I moved to Pennsylvania, I'm K to 6.
Okay.
And then it changes again, because now I think it's like early childhood to 4, and now
and it's always tricky. I mean, like, my English certification or license is 6 through 12, but I'm dabbling with the idea of getting a certificate or, an add-on or something to do gifted ed. But if you do most gifted programs, those are K through 12. So, and so my student teaching, was, we did, I think it was 2 6-week stints. It was basically a semester split in half. Mm-hmm. So I did, let's call it 6 weeks, something like that, at a high school. And then I did 6 weeks at a middle school. So I did like 11th grade and then 8th grade, and then hit graduation. And I went back to that original high school, and I long-term subbed for the end of the school year. So I went back because they planned that very nicely. My coordinating or cooperating teacher was pregnant. And so she knew she was going to need a sub. So she signed up to host a student teacher in the hopes that I was not going to be terrible. And after 2 weeks of things going okay, they offered me the long-term sub job at the end of the year. So that way I already knew the kids, and it was cool. But so, but that whole thing. So I got a full semester plus say a month and a half. And that actually seemed pretty decent, because at least I got to hit 2 different grade levels. I got middle and high school. You did a full school year student teaching.
So we did 1st and 4th. Now in elementary school, it used to be like marking periods or quarters. So we did 1st and 4th in one, and then 2nd and 3rd in the other. So we got to really see the kids at the beginning, as far as to the beginning as you could, and you get to see them at the end.
That's cool.
It was awesome. And now, like where I'm doing student teaching, working with student teachers now, they have one placement. So even if you're early childhood to 4th, like I had one in kindergarten and one in 1st. They do that same thing for a whole semester. And I think elementary is hard because, I mean, not that other things aren't hard, but the difference between, like I went from teaching personally, I taught 1st grade, then I went to 5th. That is a big difference, So if you're being certified to teach those 2 ends, you should have some experience, I would think, because really when you're trying to get a job, you're taking whatever job you get. So you can say, I want to teach 1st grade, but what if it's a 4th grade job? Are you going to say, no, I think I'll wait? I mean, elementary jobs are just not.
I'd rather not have a job and any money. That's fine.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Like you're taking the 4th grade job.
Well, and I think you're right, because I mean, I work with a woman who is fantastic. She's a really, really good teacher, and she teaches freshman English, and she doesn't want to teach anything else. She's one of, I think, 3 people in our department who has enough English master's credits or whatever to teach the dual enrollment classes with the community college, and she refuses. So the other 2 teachers have to take those classes, because I think she also, I think she stayed home with her kids for a while and then came back. And I don't know the details of it, but I'm assuming her husband must make decent money. And I say that just because anytime they even hint that she might need to take a dual enrollment class or teach another grade level, she just says, I'll just quit. Like, I'll just quit, because she loves freshmen and that's it. And I have some very good friends who teach elementary school, and I'm thinking of one in particular. She's 5th grade and that's all she wants to deal with. She's like, 5th grade, that's it. And now she has enough seniority that I doubt they would ever move her. But when you talk to her versus you talk to someone who teaches 1st grade or 2nd grade, just them talking about the classroom is so different. And you think, like, you're right. The difference between 1st and 5th grade is way bigger than the difference between 9th and 12th grade, And so while you need to be open-minded to it, you probably need to have that experience. In terms of getting the experience, like, say, the student teaching aspect, but also you mentioned how a lot of your professors, when you were at Towson, a lot of them were still practicing teachers, or at least recently practicing teachers. Mm-hmm. At James Madison University, where I went, we had 1 or 2, who were either still teaching or had taught recently. A lot of them were professors, like they're professors. And you had some who were very clearly pushing their own methods and creating a lot of materials, and they were doing a lot of publishing. And I think in a way they were playing the higher ed game of trying, JMU's a good school. It's, 15 to, I don't know, maybe there are 18,000 kids now. It has sort of turned into a place where a lot of people use it as a launch point to get into like an SEC or a Big Ten school to a bigger university. And so I think we saw a lot of that. So I had a lot of classes that were, I wouldn't even call it theory. It was heavy on like sort of the research, the data supported methods of the moment, or that supported what that professor was trying to publish. And I'm always a very practical person. And so I was doing a lot of hand raising and saying, but no one's ever going to actually do that. And like some of the professors really liked me and thought it was funny and it was good discussion. And I had a couple, like when I got my master's, the only class that I didn't get an A and I got an A-. She dinged me a bunch of points on a final project that literally no, I don't even think she read them. And so, and it was just because I kept saying, this isn't practical. No one's going to do it. But I think it was just because she was so far removed from that classroom. So like when you're thinking about either your own experience or now working with student teachers, do you feel like young teachers are getting the best guidance? Like, I'm not saying that a person with a doctorate who's doing research shouldn't be teaching. I'm not arguing that they don't have a role in this, but maybe we do need a few more active teachers there to play the role of like an active mentor. But right. I'm removed from that. Do you feel like they're getting enough of that kind of support?
I think that what we're kind of talking about is the science and the art of teaching. There is a science to teaching. There's the theory, the foundation. That's important. I mean, think about, I would assume you had this. Like, did you guys have child development theory and that kind of stuff when you were in? You probably didn't. But
yeah, I don't know. I screwed up my gen ed packages, so I took more psychology classes than any English major would ever need to. So I took early childhood. You name it. I took a psych class on how kids' brains develop because I kept screwing up picking the wrong ones.
but there's a science to that, and I think that's what you're talking about. And the current research and how it has developed from the theories that we're familiar with, I think there's a place for that. But I think that teaching is an art too. And I think that someone who is practicing or recently practicing has some insights into how that functionally works and how you make that your own. And I think there's value in that. And so it depends on where you are, I think. The education department that I work in now is a lot of doctors, but it's small. And so, I think there's a balance probably that needs to be made somehow. I don't know. I don't know how they achieve that. I think that there's good in both things. I think that there's good in students experiencing both things, but too much of either thing is probably not the right answer.
Yeah. I just like this year I'm mentoring a first year teacher. I did that. I'd done it once before formally several years ago. And I like it. And this year it's easy because the guy, he's really, really good. Like he could get no help and he would still be in the top half of our department less than awesome. A year in. So my job has been very easy. You, right? Well, once in a while, probably. But it's been easy in that way. But I like that role because, again, I think that there's so many things that you can do on paper or that you can do in theory that make you look like a good teacher. But there are a lot of things the things that actually make you effective are not always so easily quantified. And so it doesn't disregard the data. It just means that there's got to be a qualitative piece to it as well. And I think it's hard to maybe hit that in teacher preparation programs. I think it's probably hard to hit that for some administrative, policy decisions just within the district. How far do we go on just do the methods, collect the data versus you let your teachers have enough wiggle room that they can create the culture within their classroom or create the right relationships with those students. Because, the best methods in the world don't work if everyone in the room hates the teacher. So there's got to be a balance. I just don't know how you necessarily achieve that. If you could design for yourself, so I'm not asking you to step on the toes of your employer or your coworkers or anything else, thinking back to your schooling, whatever else, what do you think would be the ideal way to prepare? Like now that you've been through school, you've taught, you're supervising young teachers, what do you think just for yourself would have been the best way to prepare if you knew then what you know now kind of do?
So if you consider like the Danielson model that we work in for being evaluated, I think that we could spend more time on the basics of planning and preparation. What does that look like? What does good planning look like? What are resources you should be using when you're planning? How do you create assessments? And I think that some of that is intended to be weaved into other things. But the reality is we're preparing teachers less, like for elementary level, we're preparing less for a content and we're preparing more for everything. Like when you teach elementary, you teach everything. And so do I think that there's value in a reading class, like really children's literature? Yes, that's important. And there's a reading methods class. That is one of the most valuable classes I ever had when I was in college. Like, how do you teach kids to read? What resources, what tools do you use? How do you know what to do? That is important. But I think there is a need for more intentional teaching on some of the basic things that you need to know how to do. Because
when you say that, and I want you to answer how you want. I just want to make sure I'm clear, because I wrote something on my website a few months ago about how I think a lot of teachers, maybe especially in elementary, because you teach so many things, but even in the high school level, we're always doing professional development, and it's always on like a new software, a new method, a new data collection. It's always like pedagogy or data collection or something like that. And I always feel like, it would be good if we just brushed up on our content once in a while. And so when you say like you think teachers would benefit more from like how to do those basic things, are you thinking about creating assessments and classroom management and those kinds of things? Or when you say that, are you referring to the content side of the job? Like when you say the basic things they need, what does that mean?
Okay, so for elementary, you've I'm sure experienced this as well. There is a constant overhaul every several years. When I started teaching reading, we came up with all of our own lessons. We didn't have we did what we wanted to and what we felt was necessary for the kids that we had, which was an amazing freedom. But then you need to know how to do that. You need to know how to write units. And we had obviously standards that we're trying to cover in general. So that's not to say I had like free reign of everything, but I had a lot of freedom in that. Then you fast forward to now, a lot of schools are all scripted. And so you don't have that freedom anymore. It's taken from you. But the reality is you still need to know how to write an objective, create some very specific you need to have an assessment. You need to create procedures. You need to be able to understand and be able to do the basics of a lesson, regardless of what the curriculum is that you're given. And so that's where, if we're looking long-term, how to prepare teachers in their 40-year career or whatever they're going to teach, it's going to change so often, but some of those things are never going to change, And so and that's the part that I feel like we need to spend more time on. What are those things that are always going to be the same, no matter what? And then the other pieces, you can bring in.
And as you're saying that, and no one sees the video here, but you did the pendulum swing with your hand, which was actually, I could probably count 5 basic things. I should do that sometime. There's probably only a handful of basic things that I learned in my teacher ed classes that have really been like good to know to make me like a good teacher. And one of them is the idea that the sort of the trends or the level of freedom versus control or whatever, everything's sort of a continuum, and it's this pendulum that goes back and forth. And so, I'm in college 2001 to 2005, 2006 with a master's, and the professors were all talking about how there's, we're dealing with this increase in standardized testing, and that they were predicting we're going to get more of it, not less of it. But then they kept saying like, just don't worry about it. Make sure you cover your standards. In 20 years, you'll be back to whatever. And sure enough, at least in the state of Virginia, we're now reducing the number of standardized tests that kids are taking. Like they're still there, but they're doing fewer. And I'm like, wow, that's really true. But, in the end, you're right. I still need to be able to write a quiz. Like for all the project-based learning we're trying to do, for all of the performance assessment pieces, that's great. In the end, if I really just need to make sure 10 things, I should probably be able to write a good 10 to 20 question quiz. Just a quick check the knowledge. That's not the end all be all. I still love the project or performance, but if you skip your 10 question quiz, then you're either not getting any good information about what they know, or you're getting that information in such an inefficient way. Like you're wasting so much time to just get some basic feedback from the kids on like, what do they know and what don't they know? I think about assessment being like this really important piece of the job. And especially with all the data collection, initiatives we have now. And the professor, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember his name, but I wouldn't name him anyway. Great guy, very smart, but he was always involved in like grant writing for the university. He was always getting these like $1 million grants and all this stuff. So the semester that I had my assessment and evaluation class, he canceled every class for the entire semester, except I think 4. I think we met 4 times in the whole semester. And he told us that in the first week. And he's like, it's important that you read the book. I'm going to post some articles, give you this, read the stuff, make sure you read the stuff and you do it. And in the end, I learned at least the basics, I think pretty well. But I also think that this was a guy who essentially was thinking, I have bigger fish to fry. Our department needs this money. And his superiors clearly had to be okay with it because it wasn't like hush hush. Everyone knew we're only meeting like 4 times or whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 times in the semester. And so it's a very important piece that they sort of allowed to be brushed off, right? Now, we had a good book, we had good materials. And so I don't think that I didn't learn the basics, but I've always wondered like how much more could I have learned if we had had a more thorough class? As we've gone to both more project-based learning now, more performance pieces, and we still have the standardized tests hanging around that other people have written, or I don't know, county to county or district to district. Sometimes you do like, a county-wide assessment and benchmark stuff. Are teachers getting that better or worse than I did? If everything's supposed to be a project and then we have standardized tests, in the end, it starts to sound like that person doesn't need to know how to write a good assessment themselves. But I think that that's an important part of the job. I think it's something that should still be included. Is that something that you think students are getting? Maybe downplayed even more than I experienced?
I don't know. And I think we're kind of like, it's hard to speak from just like my small microcosm I got going on here. But I would say that I think we're approaching another massive shift. I think distance learning is highlighting some of that for us. When you and I went to school, No Child Left Behind came out in 2001. And so what this standardized testing started then really, but it kind of, by the time we were done with college, it was only just the impacts of that were really picking up, Mm-hmm. So when I was in college, we talked about that, but that wasn't our main focus. I still felt like I got a good education on creating assessments and how you use those assessments to drive instruction. Then you wonder, once everything became standardized, did they take that out, like you're saying, because it's standardized, so we don't have that anymore. Well, now we're transitioning again because there's just this idea of like 21st century students and how do we prepare students for this global economy, and how do we create people who can do more than take the standardized test, because that's not what the global job market mandates from them. So that's why we're moving to project-based learning, where it's these assessments based on kids being able to think critically and collaboratively and communicate their ideas in different ways. So do you really see an end of that? I don't think so. So yeah, I think that, college is going to be catching up to that idea that, now we need to learn to make these different assessments. Do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of
it's always like a chicken and an egg kind of thing. Like, are we doing this because somebody learned about it previously, or are we learning about it because this is what was just happening? Or, and it's this weird sort of cyclical thing. Like, it's hard to figure out who's leading, like who's driving the bus, so to speak. Like, and we're just sort of doing things. And I don't know that there's always like clear purpose in it, and maybe that's good. Maybe it's good that there isn't an easily identifiable sort of puppet master that puts it all together. But sometimes I think we jump onto new trends because they're new trends, and that's dangerous.